My name is Carol Weinshell. I'm Vice President of Program and Membership at Congregation Rodeph Sholom in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Today we are re-recording one of our Hanukah Around the World evenings. We do 8 nights for Hanukah. Deb Weiss was kind enough to re-record her session. It was wonderful, as were the other 7, but for some reason hers did not take, and it's well worth hearing. So I'm going to turn the screen over to her, and we're going to try to see a video at the end. So Deb, it's all you. Thank you so much for redoing.
Okay, and Carol, will you share the PowerPoint presentation? And I'll let you know when to switch the screen. Okay, perfect. Okay, so hi everyone. As Carol mentioned, I'm Deb Weiss, and I want to tell you a little bit about a festival called Eid al-Banat. It is also called in Hebrew Chag HaBanot, which is basically holiday for women, sometimes young women. It's also called Rosh Chodesh Lebanot. So Rosh Chodesh, of course, is the first of the month for women. And I found out about this celebration at Southern Connecticut State University a couple of years ago, where I was a part of the Judaic Studies steering committee. And someone raised this as something that we might want to do as a group to bring back this festival that is still celebrated in a number of places, but was much more celebrated worldwide, especially when there were more Jewish communities in some of the North African countries. So Mediterranean countries and North African countries. So the Judaic Studies group found it fascinating. We decided that we would explore it and celebrate it at some future time. And then COVID came, so we never got to do it. So when Carol asked me to pick a country to present this year regarding Hanukah, my thoughts went back to, I'll call this Chag HaBanot, Eid Banat, as being something that I thought would interest our community and maybe something that we would even want to implement ourselves. Okay, Carol, next slide. So where was this celebration? Where did this celebration take place? First of all, let me say when it took place. It took place during Rosh Chodesh Tevet, during Hanukah, and primarily Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, especially the island of Jerba, which in and of itself is a very interesting island where this celebration still takes place. Turkey, Thessaloniki, Libya, and the essence of the holiday was that women, young women, elderly, would gather for a celebration, and they would study, they would dance, they would sing, they would give gifts to each other, they would be blessed by the rabbis, depending on where it was celebrated. There were some different customs, and we can get into a little of that later on in this presentation. It's still very widely celebrated in the Tunisian Jewish community today. And no one is sure when people started celebrating it, although it does go back many, many years. Okay, Carol, next slide. So the celebration is a celebration of female heroes who otherwise are sometimes neglected in our history. And the tradition, one of the traditions during this holiday is to talk about women who've been especially resourceful, wily, audacious, brave. And I'm just going to mention three of them today. Queen Esther, of course, is very well known to all of us because of Purim. Judith. I'm going to talk a little bit about Judith, and I'm also going to talk about Hannah, who was the daughter of Mattatyahu and the sister of Judah Maccabee. So Hannah is someone who is not well known to us, and her story is especially relevant during Hanukah. So I'm going to just go into a little bit more detail about these three women. Okay, so starting with Judith or Yehudit. Judith is, let me just find my note here. Okay, so you've got Yehudit, Judah, you know, the feminization of the name Yehuda is Yehudit. And the story of Yehudit is of a woman who slayed Holofernes, who was the general of the Greek army. According to Tunisian tradition, this story took place during Rosh Chodesh Tevet, so there is the connection with Hanukah, and it's marked in importance with the Eid Abnat celebrations. And Judith is credited with saving, with her strength, Jerusalem and Israel. And the story went like this. So there was a Greek commander who was leading his army to put down a revolt that was beginning in Jerusalem. His name was Holofernes. And the Greek forces were encamped around the walls of the city, and they began a siege against the city. And even though Jerusalem was well fortified, the Greek army was superior, and it began to extract a toll on the citizens of the city. So a woman named Yehudit left the city and requested an audience with the commander. She brought cheese and wine with her, and her plan was to seduce him and kill him. Her plan was successful. The commander gave a feast in honor of her, and he became very drunk. That night, they retired to his private tent. He fell into a deep sleep. She took his sword and decapitated him. She then brought his head back to Jerusalem, and it was hung on the city walls for everyone to see. And the Jews were inspired by her daring heroism, and they began to resist more fiercely, and the Greek forces retreated. So Yehudit is credited with saving Jerusalem from attack during that time. I'll just add for that one that some say that cheese should be eaten during Hanukah because a miracle was done through the milk which Yehudit fed the enemy. So that's another connection with Hanukah. Okay, Queen Esther is, and I won't go into a lot of detail about Queen Esther because she's the one who is most familiar to us, but there are many of the traditions that are followed in Eid al-Bnat are similar to those that are celebrated for Purim. So one of these traditions is a women's banquet that is celebrated for Purim. And this is also what is celebrated during Eid al-Bnat. And the women would also have a seudah, a feast, that would last from morning until nightfall. They would gather together to bake cookies and sweets, to laugh and sing and dance and just overall celebrate. And Esther was surrounded by women, and her relationship with them was a relationship of sisterhood. So this ties in some of these traditions that are celebrated during Purim are also celebrated during Eid Abnat. In addition, some of the other traditions that are celebrated during Eid Nat Chag HaBanot are drinking wine, and also giving to children in need, helping children in need. So matanot le'evyonim. So we see a lot of crossovers between these two holidays, or these two celebrations. And the final story is of Hannah bat Matatiao, and Mattathias, as we know, this is very familiar to us. The story is told of the Maccabees revolting against the Greeks, and how Mattathias led Mattathias' son Judah led in the rebellion against the Greeks. And we are all familiar with that story. However, there's a story that is much less told. The speculation is, why is it much less told? First of all, we hear less about women than we hear about men, so that's one reason. But the other reason is probably that the story, which you'll hear in just a minute, is less pleasant. I mean, it's just something that people would have shied against speaking about because of the content of the stories. This is not something that you're going to talk about with children, or or in some circles. So the Jews who were living at that time had remained silent during a period where the law was that every woman who was married would first be raped by the local Greek governor before she could enter her husband's house. So now you can see why this is not a story that was widely told. The Midrash describes it as, when the Greeks saw that Israel was not affected by their decrees, they stood and decreed upon them a bitter and ugly decree, that a bride would not go into her husband on her wedding night, but rather to the local commander. So, really we can only speculate how many women underwent this violent humiliation. And the Midrash also tells us that the men of the Hasmonaim family did nothing about this, and the women of Israel fell victim to this again and again. The wedding day of Mattathiao's daughter, Hannah, was approaching. And Hannah decided that she was going to put an end to this atrocity. So in the middle of her wedding banquet, in order to garner attention, she ripped off her wedding dress and she was naked in front of family and friends. And she clapped her hands loudly in order to draw attention to herself, and everyone was just shocked. Many wanted to kill her for having disgraced the family, but she scolded them for turning a blind eye to what was happening and knowing that she was going to be raped at the governor's palace. And what happened in the end was her brothers and uncles snuck in with her and killed the governor during the time at the time that he was supposed to rape her. And, again, the question is, why do we not celebrate this? And I think you can see from the content of the story that it's not an easy story. I've told it kind of bluntly. People can soften it, say it in a different way, but this is what the tradition was, and it's actually quite awful. But Hannah stood up to her brothers, her family, and to the Greeks, and was able, according to the tradition, to put an end to that tradition. So those are the stories of the three heroines, but there are more. It's not only about these three heroines. During this holiday, during this celebration, and I shouldn't say holiday because it is for the celebration of Hanukah, but it is just, let's call it like a sub celebration of Hanukah for women, that women celebrate. These are three women who were spoken of, but there are certainly other female heroines. It's not exclusively these three women, but it's a celebration of female heroines for their strength and their courage. Okay, next slide, Carol. So here are some of the customs. These differ from country to country. As we mentioned, women make sweets, they bake, they eat honey cakes. There is in some of the communities an evening of study, dance, and singing. They light the monthly Rosh Chodesh candles along with the Hanukah candles to celebrate Rosh Chodesh. They send gifts to each other. In Tunisia, for example, there is a jointly yearly bat mitzvah. I don't know if this is still celebrated, but this was the tradition that all of the girls who had come of age during that year would have a community bat mitzvah, which is a lovely tradition. Women would receive blessings from the rabbi, and in Thessaloniki, women would fast and ask for forgiveness. So the traditions changed or were different from one community to another, but they all had to do with women celebrating women. Next one, Carol. So this is a video that shows some of the celebration that took place. This is in Morocco. And I know that we've had some problems with the video, but Carol will send the link for this. She's playing it now. I don't think that you're hearing sound, but you can just see a little bit of the video portion of it, and then you'll have the link so that you'll be able to hear the singing as well. So that's the end of my presentation. I regret, the part that's missing is there were some really excellent questions and questions that people asked and comments that people made. So I'm sorry, I apologize that we don't have that portion to offer, but I'm certainly happy if anyone has any questions, wants to discuss it. Carol, maybe we can do this as an activity for Hanukkah next year. That would be something that would be interesting to try to bring back and, bring to our community. That could be a lot of fun.
Actually, I think there's so much to your program that maybe we'll do a coffee and conversation when you return and talk about this. We'll find how we can tie it in so we do it sooner than later. And I will see how to get the link attached so that people can see the program, the dancing, the singing. It's quite extraordinary. And it may go out in our constant contact as a separate link. So I'm hoping that will work. Deb, I can't thank you enough for doing this a second time. You're just terrific, and this was so fascinating.
That's my pleasure.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording now.